I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We are so excited to be here with you. One of our special Friday daytime streams, which lets us talk to people in different parts of the world. So we are so excited to be joined by you. We have an absolutely fantastic rundown today, fantastic roster of amazing guests. We will be speaking to, in reverse order, Dennis Kucinich, Dr. Mohammad Marandi, and Dr. Ramzy Baroud. I will tell you more about them shortly. But before we start, please do not forget to click the like button. That's a great way to help us build the viewership of this channel and fight against algorithmic suppression. Also, please do become subscribers. We are at over 450,000 subscribers, and we want to hit 475 soon. And become Patreon supporters. And you can do that at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. For $5 a month, you get access to bonus interviews, extended interviews, early release, behind the scenes content. And in fact, you get access to a full, excellent interview that we did with John Mearsheimer and Yanis Varoufakis, which includes a discussion about China. Now, if you can't pull that off, you can't do the $12, the $5 a week, which is like 25 cents a day, Monday through Friday, you can, and you still want to make the show happen and support the show, you can do a $1 a month. So that's $12 a year to help make this show happen, because we literally could not do the show without your support. You can also, for people who are YouTubers, obviously people watching now are on YouTube, you can become YouTube members, and you can do that by just hitting join become. Let me see, Brad, do you know what they have to do to become YouTube members? Can I bring on the stage? Oh, there you are.
I believe once you're subscribed to a channel, then you would just hit that button again.
Okay, great, perfect. So yeah, exactly.
Remember?
Yes. So please do, if you prefer. You have two options basically for extra content: Patreon or YouTube membership. Now, this is live, and guys, I really need you to up these likes. This is not for personal validation. This is for fighting against algorithmic suppression. Okay, we're pretty good on the likes on the vertical. I mean on the horizontal, but we could use more than half of you liking. That would be great. Let's see how you compare to the vertical. Let's see. All right, I need over half. What?
And I'm sorry, Katie, just to be more specific for everyone, if they don't already know, when you see the subscribe button on YouTube and you press that, then you're subscribed to the channel. That button then turns into a button that says join.
Great.
And so then you would press the join button to be a member.
Perfect. Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Brad. Okay, so we are going to bring on our first guest. We are absolutely thrilled to be doing that. He's been on the show before. He's just a wonderful writer, wonderful journalist, really a wonderful human being, if I may. His name is Ramzy Baroud. He's a journalist, author, editor of the Palestine Chronicle. He is the author of 6 books, including Before the Flood, Our Vision for Liberation, My Father Was a Freedom Fighter, and The Last Earth. He is a non-resident senior research fellow at the Center for Islam and Global Affairs, and his website is ramzybaroud.net. So welcome back to the show, Ramzy. Hello.
Hi, Katie. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining. And, it is pretty devastating that we this week marked the 1,000 day of genocide. So we've passed the 1,000 day mark of genocide. What are your thoughts on this? And did you expect it to last so long? And of course, you are yourself from Gaza.
That's right. No, I did not expect it to last this long, despite the fact that, Katie, throughout our history, especially in Gaza in particular, we have these kind of, these tragedies that kind of fold into other tragedies, and we kind of like cut off and start all over again. So Gaza has been under Israeli occupation since 1967. Then, we stopped counting when the siege started in 2006. And then we started talking about, well, 1 year since the siege, 2 years since the siege. The siege got worse and worse. It got interrupted by some massive wars, leading to the killing and wounding of tens of thousands of Palestinians. We thought that we saw the worst of things, and the world kind of got acclimated to the idea that Palestinians, continue to subsist in that horrific reality until the genocide happened. And yet we kind of pushed the reset button and started counting, on a year of genocide, 2 years, and now 1,000 days. So in a sense, we are used to some part of the counting of tragedies, but not to the extent of outright extermination. And the world seems to be willing to coexist with this reality.
How does it feel? I mean, what is it like for you, your kind of daily existence, knowing that both your family is still there and knowing that the world, as you just said, is willing to coexist with this genocidal reality and enable it?
Well, I am a positive guy, and I will insist on remaining positive. It's just a thing that we Palestinians have to insist on, because the moment we stop trying to be optimistic about things is just the moment that we are going to fall into deep despair from which there is no escape. So the optimistic side of me wants to say, yes, you carried out your genocide, but you failed to push our people out of Palestine. We remain there. We remain strong. Our Sumud has moved from being a conceptual framework into something functional that we are using on a daily basis. Our relationship with Palestine hasn't changed. Our love for the homeland remains strong. We have, as a culture, emerged even stronger, despite of everything that they have done to us, which means that ultimately we are going to win this. We can't possibly lose when we have this much faith, this much tenacity, these deep roots, this insistence on life. But on the other hand, there is the everyday subject that you have to deal with. People calling me, family, cousins, their wives, their children, my nephews, my nieces, of dealing with the everyday life of, not being able to survive. I mean, we had many members of my family killed in the genocide, but others have died since then. I mean, since supposedly the ceasefire was signed in October of last year. Some of them have been wounded in the war itself, but some have perished because of easily treatable diseases. I had I kind of the daughter of my nephew, a 2-year-old girl. She had some complications when she was born during the genocide. She needed some surgery that could have been done easily to correct some artery in her heart, and they waited on the waiting list for the longest time. They thought that because I'm in America, I have the power to make things happen. Call the United Nations, bring the child out to Egypt for treatment. Of course, I failed them every single time. I couldn't do anything. I don't know anybody in the United Nations who was able to bring anybody. So she died. She died in a tent. All I can do is to register her story, write her story, publish the testimonies of people in Gaza. Beyond that, we Palestinians outside this feel this total despair that we are not part of that community that is able to solidify somehow and survive together. We are alone in a sense, and we also feel completely helpless, that we can't help them in any meaningful way. So kind of between these two balances, the real despair that individuals feel on a daily basis and the hope that comes from the collective and the power of the community itself. And I feel like we are in this limbo that we, one morning we are feeling hopeful, the other morning we are feeling not. And that's what's been in the last 1,000 days.
I'm so sorry for that. I mean, I always feel so silly saying that because, I mean, words kind of are insufficient, right? Like, I'm so sorry. It just sounds like a platitude and it's so inadequate. But I have a question for you, which is, what can people here do, right? Like, you have family and friends, you are elevating their stories, registering their stories, as you said. So many people around the world feel this hopelessness and helplessness and despair, but they are extremely, emotionally invested and disturbed by what's happening in Gaza. What are some things that people can do?
Well, there's the immediate thing that can be done now, and there is the long-term aspects of the struggle. The immediate thing is, you need to put pressure on your governments, on your representatives. It actually does work. I mean, there are certain things that are once in a while allowed to access Gaza through pressure coming from a certain European government that heeded the call of its civil society. This is not just something in the imagination. This is real and it's tangible and it does help. There are thousands of Palestinian wounded who are unable to leave for treatment. We do have organizations, whether through the United Nations or various NGOs, that part of various national ecosystems in the US, Canada, the rest of the Western world and beyond, that are able to talk to the Israeli government, put pressure on the Israeli government and make that happen. There are various organizations like UNRWA and many others that are actually, like, right now, I haven't, to be honest with you, Katie, haven't always been a big supporter of UNRWA for historical reasons. I mean, UNRWA was supposed to be kind of, just sustaining the refugees, but without offering any political solutions because it had no such mechanisms, no such mandate. So it's not like we Palestinians have been fighting for UNRWA as if our political aspirations are linked to UNRWA. But suddenly UNRWA is so important to us right now because as long as UNRWA exists, as long as there is a recognition that there is a Palestinian refugee crisis, and these are people who are linked to international law, UN resolutions, the right of return. And this is what Kushner hates. This is what Netanyahu hates. That's what the Board of Peace, in fact, the Board of Peace, just a few days ago, they came up with this thing that says, that there is no place for UNRWA in Gaza. Why is the Board of Peace so keen on removing UNRWA from Gaza? Why is Ben Gvir so keen on destroying UNRWA buildings in Jerusalem and taking selfies with the destroyed rubble? So now UNRWA is very important for us for obvious reasons. So support UNRWA, support the Friends of UNRWA, support organizations that sustain the Palestinian struggle and in its various dimensions, whether humanitarian or political or any other. There are lawyers. I mean, just the fact that there is a lawfare against the Palestinian people and their supporters around the world. You can't open your mouth without being sued nowadays. I need these lawyers. We need these lawyers to work together to defend the supporters of Palestine, to defend the rights of the Palestinian refugees. And this is very important, who have made it to Europe for various reasons, maybe during the earlier part of the genocide. In some of these cases, they are mistreated in some European countries. Their children are taken away from them. We need lawyers to work together to ensure that the rights of those Palestinians are protected. So there is so much you can do. You just need to look around you in your local and domestic sphere and look around you and see what can you do to help and support. But of course, there is the bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is that Israel, Zionism, extremism, racism, genocide, all of this need to be exposed to the rest of the world. As long as Israel is able to find the balance and the margins to exist as if it's a legitimate country, a legitimate member of the United Nations, as long as Israel is able to carry on with these crimes in Gaza and mask them as if the whole thing about Israel has the right to defend itself. Israel needs to be exposed and it needs to be stopped. And I have so much faith in civil society, not because, for any just conceptual random reasons, but because the numbers are telling us that the world is indeed changing. It's changing in Europe faster than the US, but we cannot discount the United States. 41% of all Americans as of February support and sympathize with the Palestinian people versus 36% with Israel. This is unprecedented. Earlier this month in June, another opinion poll came out that says 48% of of Americans say that our support or American government support for Israel is too much. It needs to stop. So civil society has spoken and continues to speak, and the numbers are changing. Now, we need to use these numbers to push our local politicians, our representatives, all the way to the Congress, so that they would translate this existing support, sympathy, solidarity, and love for Palestine into actual policy. So indeed, there is so much that can be done. We just need to, kind of be aware of our surroundings. Where are we? What kind of power? What kind of access? What kind of mobilization do we have? And how can we leverage that to achieve something different as far as policy is concerned?
Right. Yes, there's always the lag, the policy lag behind the change in public opinion. But of course, we won't have the policy change without the public opinion. So it's both it's discouraging, but it's also encouraging, right? Because it's what's the concept in philosophy? It's necessary but insufficient, right? It's necessary but insufficient to have this change in thinking and in the way that these things are viewed. I remember seeing the film The Encampments, and seeing a journalist from Gaza. I can't remember her name. This is embarrassing. She's very well known. She has curly hair, very brave. She's won awards. And she was talking about the encampments and got tears in her eyes. And it was very, encouraging, not to sound like I'm congratulating Americans, but Bassam, thank you, Bassam. Someone wrote in the comments. It was encouraging to see that our protest was providing something to the people of Gaza, if that makes sense, even just on an emotional level, because I think we can feel so hopeless and helpless here. Yeah,
of course. I've lived in Gaza until my 20s, right. And I do recall. This whole emotional component, and I know maybe even some of your listeners are saying, can we please move beyond the emotional, psychological help? But I can't even emphasize how important it is. Because when I lived in Gaza under siege. Gaza, by the way, has always been under siege. It's just various layers of siege. Some of you are allowed to leave some of the time. Some of you are allowed to leave all the time and never come back. None of you are allowed to leave, depending on the mood of the Israeli military administration, the Israeli government. But it's not like when I lived in Gaza, the times were good. It was during the first Intifada. The siege was hermetic and things were equally terrible. But whenever the Israeli army would allow us to go to the sea, and we had very limited number of hours in which we are allowed to access the sea. And by the way, I lived 5 minutes away from the sea. During the first Intifada, 7 years, I didn't see the sea once. 5 minutes. That's the kind of siege we were living on, because it was a closed military zone. The sea, the Mediterranean Sea, for all of us. And for some of us, not all of us living in Gaza, very poor, or vast majority of us are poor people, the sea was the only outlet. So you can't even access the only place that brings you a sense of joy. But whenever we were allowed to access the sea, we used to always look at the horizon and see these ships passing at the very, at the horizon. And we would, start kind of thinking about, who are these people? And there's a thing that we have in Gaza culture. I really don't know if they have it in the West Bank or not. I don't. But every time a name of a nation is mentioned, it's always we say, بيحبونا? Do they love us? Not do they like us, do they love us? We made so many decisions, even when we watched football. Now you have the World Cup going on. We watched football or the World Cup based on, do they love us or they don't love us? Because we were always so keen on knowing how did the world feel about us, because we lived in total isolation. We didn't know if people knew or didn't. Whenever there were clashes in my refugee camp, we would listen to the Voice of London, the Voice of Monte Carlo. These are like the West-based stations, and we would be so delighted to hear that 2 young people were killed in the Nusayrat refugee camp. That's my refugee camp in central Gaza. 2 young people were killed. And even though it would be a terrible tragedy, that, so your peers, your neighbors, your friends were just buried in the martyrs' graveyard. And you would be thinking like, oh, thank God, someone knows. And that knowledge, we didn't know what they are going to do with that knowledge. But the mere knowledge that someone knows that there is a large group of people who are caged in, abused, discriminated against, treated with so much inhumanity and so much violence. The fact that someone knows, that means so much. That
Wow.
maybe something will happen. Maybe someone will come to the rescue. Now Gaza knows that the world knows. And that means so much for Gaza. Not for the sentimental value of knowing, but there is still that hope that maybe that knowledge will translate to action. Maybe
Right.
that will mean solidarity, and solidarity would mean a tangible difference on the ground of Gaza. So that's why you have this intimate relationship between Gaza and the rest of the world throughout history, generation after generation. Now that the world knows, what are they going to do with that knowledge? That's
Right.
what truly matters at this point.
It's interesting when you mentioned your optimism, it made me think of this quote by Bobby Sands, the hunger striker who was killed in a prison under Margaret Thatcher. And he said, our revenge, he was a Republican, Irish Republican. He said, our revenge will be the laughter of our children. He wrote that once. And I always think of that. I often think of that when I'm hearing, when I see the children of Gaza, and I see the joy that the people of Gaza demonstrate despite what is happening. And I'm not romanticizing, I'm not whitewashing. I mean, we see children who are killed, like blown to bits. It's like the highest per capita amputation rate now. And yet you also do see this joy.
You do, and it expresses itself in so many different ways. During my generation, we dealt with it through humor. Maybe humor now is not the most appropriate way of dealing or trying to process or internalize this, just because it's too much, it's too extreme for you to find a joke in any of this. But during my generation, we dealt with it through humor. The soldiers would come and raid the house, and they would leave, and somehow we would go to the street and we start sharing the funny things we noticed about the soldiers. How that soldier was trying to break the only water tank in the house, and he slipped and he fell on his back. And we would laugh so hard with total disregard to the fact that we just lost our storage of water. But the fact that he fell, we found that funny. So we used the humor to deal with so much. And I think during the Intifada, I mean, I am surprised that nobody actually wrote a book about how Palestinians use humor to deal with these issues. I tried in my book, My Father Was a Freedom Fighter, to inject so many of these stories as much as I could without belittling the tragedy of being a Palestinian refugee in Gaza. If you are up for it, I can tell you one of the stories I shared.
Yes, please, yeah.
In the book. Well, during the military curfews, the Israelis wouldn't, they would cut off the electricity, would cut off the water, and you can't leave your house, otherwise you get shot and so forth. Well, you can't also get your garbage in the street, and there's no garbage collection. But then in the summer, you get suffocated by the garbage is piling up. I mean, one of the curfews during the Iraq war, they shut down Gaza completely. 57 days of total curfew. You can't leave. We were drinking, rainwater. Like we used to pray for rain, for a summer rain, summer storm. And indeed, our prayers were answered. And we were, we collected all this dirty water that comes through the roof, and we actually drank it in order for us to survive. But at one point, my father was fed up, and he decided it is time that we throw the garbage anywhere. It doesn't matter where it goes. Now, the Israeli soldiers would go from one neighborhood to the other, knock at doors, get people out, punch, slap, break bones, sometimes shoot, arrest, raid. But once they are out of the neighborhood, you have a little bit of a breathing space. Maybe you can actually open your door and talk to a neighbor. Maybe you can smoke a cigarette on the top of the stairs. And so they would kind of try to steal these few seconds here and there until the soldiers are back. So at that point, my dad decided that we are going to put the garbage all in one large plastic bag and throw it right in the middle of the street and let the soldiers deal with it. We can't live like this. And that's exactly what we did. We put all the garbage in one large plastic bag and we threw it right in the middle of the street, and we ran home and we locked the door. The soldiers come back. Now the soldiers are not sure what is that in the middle of the street. They were under the impression that there was a bomb of some kind. You would think that half of the Israeli army was hovering over that garbage bag. I mean, you had the tanks, you had helicopters, and then they bring robots that are poking through our garbage while the snipers and soldiers are hiding behind all the graves, because we lived right by the martyrs' graveyard. Everybody is hiding, all the snipers looking in every possible directions, the helicopters hovering above, tanks everywhere, the entire neighborhood under siege, and you have these robots poking the garbage to find out that it was just slices of watermelon and that sort of thing. My gosh, exactly what a metaphor. We laughed for ages over that. My dad used to be a fighter back in the day in the Palestine Liberation Army, and his friends would say, "A warrior is always a warrior, Abu Anwar." That was his nickname, the father of Anwar. A warrior is always a warrior. You brought the entire Israeli army just to find out that you were throwing garbage in the street. And of course, a story like this will become the story of the neighborhood for days to come, until another story comes and take over, and so forth and so on. So culture for us is a mechanism of survival. These kids that you see dancing and doing debka and national songs on Instagram and TikTok, they are, whether I don't think they are even aware of it, but it's a generational continuation of something that they started many, many years ago. It's what we do. Defiance does not have to always be in terms of political slogans. Defiance can happen through dance, through art, through humor, through numerous manifestations that psychologically sustain the Palestinian people.
Right. Yeah. And what is, you mentioned Sumud before. Can you explain to people who don't know what it is? Because it's related, I think, to this humor.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, this might sound a little bit weird. I think before the Palestinian people, if we are to write the story of the Palestinian people, there was the concept of karame, dignity. I think dignity became before us. We were molded around the concept of dignity. We live for dignity. This is not a material struggle for things. We don't want things. We just want dignity. And dignity, everything branches out of it. Freedom branches out of dignity, self-respect, self-love, community, camaraderie, all of these things, and resistance. They all come out of dignity. And then the Palestinian people. And with the Palestinian people comes Sumud. So Sumud translates to steadfastness, but I don't think so. I think this is, there's an element of, steadfastness, resilience. There's an element of passiveness in this, as if they do something to us and we are resilient, that we do not break. I think it's more than that. I think it's a very proactive term. I think Sumud is functional. Everything that we do, the reason that people in Gaza remained in Gaza because of Sumud. Because, by the way, Katie, a lot of people don't know that about 10 years ago, there was a time that Palestinians broke through the fence with Egypt, through Rafah, and they dashed into the Sinai Desert in their tens of thousands because the siege was so horrific. And they had no fuel, they had no food, they had nothing. They purchased what they wanted from Egyptian towns and from Rafah, and they actually went back, except of about 200 of them, students who needed to go to their universities, whether in Russia, Ukraine, Egypt, or elsewhere. But the vast majority, why did they come back? I mean, you just escaped a siege and a war that seems to be perpetual. Why did you come back? They came back because of Sumud, because of that relationship they have with Palestine. In fact, I was in an interview a couple of days ago, and it was a bit of a mainstreamish sort of interview where the host asked me, he says, "But Ramzy, I heard that people wouldn't leave Gaza because Hamas is not allowing them to do so." I mean, imagine how this audacity that even our relationship and love and rootedness in our land somehow is being blamed on our fear that Hamas said, if you leave, I'm going to shoot you, sort of thing. But it's not. They are there because of Sumud. It is something that is akin to our identity, is something very close to our heart. And it's the very reason that Palestinians, I interviewed this fighter for the book for Before the Flood.
Which is excellent.
That's right. I interviewed his wife after he was killed in the early days of the war. Later on, his eldest son was killed fighting, and later on, his third son was killed fighting. Knowing their fate in advance, it just was not enough for them to cower, to step back, to escape, or to allow fear to take over their lives. This is the kind of complexity that I don't think not only even mainstream media, but honestly, academic conversation, even sympathetic to Palestine, cannot possibly encapsulate or explain to the people. But yeah, we Palestinians exist beyond Hamas and Fatah, exist beyond the United Nations and the Board of Peace, exist beyond Netanyahu and the ones who came before him, whether Peres or Sharon or Shamir. We will exist after all of them are gone. And when they are all gone, we are going to be there. And we are going to look back, and we are going to develop songs and nasheeds and dances and jokes about that horrific period in our lives, but we will eventually move on.
Yeah. So you're saying Sumud, it's often translated as steadfastness, but it's a more active thing than steadfastness.
It is. Yeah, definitely. And we have seen that in Gaza in the last 1,000 days.
Wow. Yeah. I also wanted to ask you a question, Ramzy, about, let's see, do I want to go to that next, or do I want to, I think I'm actually going to save that for when you and Dr. Marandi aren't together. So I'm going to ask you a different question. So in your excellent book, Before the Flood, you write, quote, "The deep-rooted historical continuum between the Palestinian past, present, and future is the very essence of this book," end quote. And as you explore, this continuum is in many ways rooted in resistance. So can you briefly detail this history and some of the various stories of resistance throughout this history that you detail in the book?
Well, I situate the book, Katie, within what French historians refer to as long history or longue durée.
Right.
This idea that we might be behaving in a certain way, but we might not actually be aware of the fact that our behavior is linked to a previous generation and ultimately our ancestors. Palestine has been a place of invasions. Many invaders came and went, starting with Alexander, with his Macedonian army, and all the way until Napoleon came and went, and then the British, the Ottomans and the British, and ultimately the Israelis. Gaza in particular has fought every one of them. And sadly, because the way that we Palestinians are forced to frame our history around the Balfour Declaration, the Nakba, and so on, we are often pushed to neglect that history. That we fought Alexander. We fought Alexander for 3 months. And it took a great deal of massacres that allowed him to finally conquer Gaza. And we have done this in the same neighborhoods you hear about in the news right now, Zaytun, Jabalia, and these other areas, Khan Yunis. They actually acquired their reputation in resistance long before there was a Zionism or a Zionist project or Zionist leaders and that sort of thing. And that's what makes Gaza nearly impossible for Israel to subdue. Armed resistance in Gaza started immediately after that.
Ramzy, I'm so sorry to
when the
interrupt you.
refugees were
Can
pushed.
Sorry, Ramzy. a little glitchy. Brad, is he glitchy for you too? It's not me, right?
Well, just a little bit, but it's not.
Well, I'm just thinking maybe he can. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ramzy.
Yeah,
if you can refresh your, you know how to refresh your page,
or if there is, or if
any other page.
If you have any other extraneous things going on in your computer that might be
I do not.
Okay,
But
you
maybe
don't,
you can show me how to refresh.
There's a like a circle.
It's going to involve you temporarily dropping from right here, and so you would basically just rejoin.
Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, I just want to make sure you're as good, the quality is as good as possible. And if anyone in your house is like streaming stuff, you can ask them to not do that also. That could be fighting with it. Thank you.
But we're okay.
Yeah.
I mean, worst case scenario, it's not.
Yeah, it's tolerable, but if it can be better, that would be great, right?
Sure.
But yeah. You know, in the meantime, I can, by the way, I have, Brad, I downloaded a let me send this to you. In the meantime, I want to do a little preview of a some of the recent oh wait, let's see if he's here. I was going to upload a video file to tease the let's see, where are we with this? To tease a great clip of John Mearsheimer, but let's see if Ramzy oops, I just did the same one twice. Let me remove this.
Is it something that you said you sent it to me?
I didn't yet. But I'm uploading it.
Let me
see how much.
David Borneo.
Okay, let's see. Okay, great. Yeah. And everyone, this is a great time to encourage everyone to like the stream, to subscribe, and then become members, to become Patreons. Okay. So now Ramzy is back, and hopefully he will be less glitchy. Where is it? You seeing, Brad?
And while he's rejoining, is it possible to send me the?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I uploaded them, but sure. 1 second. Also, we added a very important video that Nate sent you.
Yep.
Okay, great. And that could go, that Nate video could go in this section, I think. Well, okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. Great.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. So sorry, Ramzy. Okay, great. Okay.
I hopefully it's a bit better now.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Okay. So I'm so sorry. Where were we? I should have, we were talking about the various acts of resistance.
The fact that resistance started in Gaza.
Oh, yes. And Alexander.
Immediately after the Nakba, there was a group of fighters called the Fidaiyin. There was no ideology at the time. They were just fallahin. They were peasants. They were the peasants who were pushed out of their land. There was no Hamas to blame. There was no Soviet Union to accuse of bringing communism to Palestine. There was nothing of that nature. They were just fallahin. But of course, the Israelis always had a term for every stage of Palestinian resistance. There were the communists. Well, in the beginning, there were the mukharribin, they called them, the troublemakers. And that after the troublemakers, there were the communists. And after the communists, there were the Islamists. There was always a reason. But nobody is asking, why are Palestinians resisting? Why do they continue to resist? And why did they resist in the first place? Maybe it has something to do with the fact that they were ethnically cleansed from their own home, and that their historic homeland was stolen from them, was robbed from them, and they were massacred, and their villages were burned, and their harvest was burned, and they were pushed into refugee camps, humiliated and degraded. And maybe that's why they resisted. So the resistance in Palestine been going on for a very long time, and is just a natural reaction to military invasions, conquest, and that sort of thing. And the Zionists are not the exception. Palestinians resist not because they are driven by any sinister ideology. They resist because that's what they have always been doing in response to military invasion and the sort.
Right. And in fact, Brad, do you have that video that Nate sent to you just now, the latest thing? Okay, great. So I want to talk about the kind of pathologization of resistance, the way that resistance is pathologized, the way that Palestinians, Lebanese, Iranians are portrayed as these violent brutes. who are willing to kill their own, to send their kids off to die. I want to interject recently released video. Now, many of us knew that this had already happened, but there's recent video of basically Israel ordering the Hannibal Directive on October 7th. Let's take a look at this. And the Hannibal Directive, of course, is when you are allowed to kill your own, basically, to prevent an exchange. Yeah. Right now, I would bomb the entire. Sorry, let me slow this down. Can you start from the beginning? 1 second. And okay, right now, I would bomb the entire Gaza border with artillery. Hit them with a blow so they'd have a real problem. It looks like they're on it. I wrote this to Amir. They're not even getting fighter helicopters in the air. Sorry, Brad, you have to slow it. They're not even getting fighter helicopters. It looks, they're not, you can pause it. Just pause it, please. They're not even getting fighter helicopters in the air. You think they're on it? No, on Gaza. Break it all apart, along with the soldiers who got abducted. Those are the first moments in the police command center. This is where, in which community? Even before the minister in charge arrives. Before it is decided what will be broadcast and what will be censored. And there's Ben-Gvir. Wait, are you filming me? You could film me when I give you permission. That's Ben-Gvir speaking. Please take this out. Okay, so this was recently revealed. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it shows that the intention was clear from the very beginning. What the Israelis have been doing in Gaza, it was a decision that was made from the very start. And it really kind of gives a lot of credibility to the claim that the Israelis had intentions in Gaza even before October 7, because the nature of the Israeli, let's call it response, just for the sake of argument, the nature of the Israeli response, the immediate plans that were brought into action, that ranged from, well, genocide being the most minimal of these plans, all the way as Minister of Heritage, the Minister of Heritage at the time proposed to drop a nuclear bomb on Gaza. I mean, all these plans were already there. They were not, conjuring up plans at the spur of the moment, which really tells us, that should explain to people that Israel had that plan initially made for Gaza. Maybe the October 7 events have sped up these plans. But the plans were just, and in fact, the fact that he would say, before the minister in charge even arrives, let's do 1, 2, 3, that was already in action. That was already decided upon way ahead.
Right, yeah. And I just think it's so rich that you and Iranians, as I said, sorry, 1 second. That you and the Iranians and Lebanese, as I said, are portrayed as these violent, death-obsessed fighters, and Israel would never kill anyone intentionally, much less their own, right? You guys are always pathologized as sending your young off to die. And where's the outcry and outrage about this, about Israel being willing to kill its own? I mean, the double standard is just striking, let alone, obviously, the way that they just absolutely massacre Palestinians.
Well, that's right, Katie. But I feel like there are two contexts here that are important. Number one, the fact that this is the language they use against Palestinians, against, against every liberation movement that fought against every colonial power anywhere, not just in the global south, but even in Ireland and elsewhere. This is something that's been going on for a long time, the dehumanization of those who are resisting and putting their lives on the lines and sacrificing everything. They were called the wild dogs of Australia, and they were called the terrorists of Palestine, and so forth and so on. So this is something that is just the nature of colonialism. That's the discourse that accompanies colonialism. While the colonialists always perceive themselves as, those who are on civilizing missions, those who are coming to bringing prosperity and stability and so forth and so on. I mean, look at what the Americans are saying constantly in the Middle East: stability, stability. How can you be the very military that is pulverizing little children in a school in Iran, and at the same time, at the exact same press conference, at the exact same moment, you continue to talk about stability and peace and peace and stability? But the other dimension to this, I think it's really important, if you would allow me, Katie, to be a bit critical here of us, because I feel like the power of the Zionist propaganda and Western media is so enormous that it left no margins for us to actually say, you know what, it's okay to resist. In fact, you have to resist.
Right.
It's your freaking moral duty to resist. Because if you don't resist, your people are going to be pushed into the desert. Palestine will be gone. It's going to be over. Who's going to defend? If I was living in Gaza right now and someone comes to my house with a Merkava tank when my children are there sleeping in their bedroom, to come in to demolish the house on top of them, what should they do? What should any human being with a iota of courage does? But the issue here is that because of the margins don't exist for us to have a realistic, rational conversation in polite companies, in mainstream anything, including academia and even including within leftist circles, we are constantly on the defensive. Oh, not all Palestinians love Hamas.
Right.
Well, the issue is
Hamas
not about
isn't
Hamas.
all Palestine, right?
In the 70s, there was no Hamas. There were the communists running Gaza. There were the PFLP running Gaza. There were the socialists. In South Lebanon, when the Palestinians were fighting along with the Lebanese, we had hundreds of women fighters. I mean, how progressive can you actually get that you have women on the front lines? Had nothing to do with Islam, religion, theocracy, none of that. But no, every single stage, we constantly apologize. We constantly distance yourself as if those who are fighting are actually part of the problem. Quite often I hear Palestinians and others speak about extremists on both sides. So Ben Gvir is now being compared to those who are resisting to defend Gaza, or Jenin, or Tulkarem. Why should that be rational? So we need to challenge that. We need to be bold enough and say, if you condemn the resistance in Gaza, you condemn the resistance against every colonial movement from Cuba to Venezuela to Kenya to South Africa to Vietnam. And if you do that, I don't know if you will even have a moral leg to stand on.
Right. Yeah. Well, very well said. Yeah, it's true, because I hear this again and again from people who are good on this, right, and who are critical of Israel, but they say, like, Palestine is not Hamas, or all Palestinians are not Hamas. Now, there is a question I would love. I want to bring on our next guest and have you guys talk about the relationship between Gaza and Iran. But Ramzy, I am going to have you back on soon to talk about your next book. And what I do want to ask with you, talk about with you, so I'm going to remember this, is how Palestinians are not a monolith and what they think about Hamas, right? And I want to get into that with you in a way that doesn't kind of do exactly what you said, right? Which is dismiss resistance as inherently, like automatically dismiss resistance as bad, and think that the way you defend Palestinians is say, don't worry, they don't all want to resist, right? Now that's, I agree with you, but then I do want to get into the question of how different people see resistance, or see Hamas, or see October 7th. But again, this is a very different conversation than I'm having with you, because obviously I reject the premise that, some idiots in the comments even said this, like, what did they say? Like, you started a war and now you're crying. Like, that whole framing as if October 7th came out of nowhere. So you and I will have a very different discussion from the one that we see in the mainstream media. But I do want to bring in our next guest, because I think that you guys will have a fascinating exchange. And this is none other than show fave, fan fave, professor of Orientalism and English literature at the University of Tehran, Dr. Mohammad Marandi. Welcome back to the show. Hello. And hopefully we won't have the glitchiness that we had last time. Okay. Hi, Dr. Marandi. How are you? Did I curse it by saying that?
Last time it was my fault.
Well, okay. Are you, let's see. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I guess my connection's not that much better.
No, it is a little bit better. I think there's less of a delay, but welcome back to the show. It is always wonderful to see you, especially given what's happening right now to your country of Iran.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's always a great pleasure being on your show, especially when Ramzy is on.
Great. Yes. Well, I wanted to ask each of you about the relationship between the places that you come from, the interconnection, what the effect of the war in Iran is having on Gaza and all West Asia, and also what effect what is happening in Gaza has on Iran.
It's very complicated. What's happening in, I mean, let me put it this way. In Iran, before the revolution, the revolutionaries had three major foreign policy grievances when it came to the Shah. And one was that decisions were not made in Tehran. They were made in Washington and back then in London too. The second was South Africa. And the Shah was supporting the apartheid regime. Almost all of its oil was coming from Iran. And the revolutionaries wanted to cut off ties with apartheid South Africa and to support the resistance in Southern Africa as well as South Africa and the frontline states. And the third, of course, was Palestine. And at that time, the Shah was also providing the Israeli regime with a large amount of its oil. And the relations were quite good. And Iran, the revolutionaries wanted to cut off ties with the regime, all ties, and to recognize the Palestinians as the legitimate representatives of that land. So this narrative, this discourse, this belief, this ideology existed before the revolution. And so when the revolution succeeded, obviously, Iran immediately cut off ties with apartheid South Africa, as well as the Israeli regime, and Iran's foreign policy shifted completely towards supporting liberation movements across the world, support for Cuba, for Nicaragua. Back then, of course, we lived in a different world from now, but in any case, Iran tilted towards the non-aligned movement and other such entities that were championing the global South at a time when the world was divided between the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. Gaza itself wasn't so much the focus of attention. It was Palestine. And back then, the representative of the Palestinian people who we all knew about was Yasser Arafat or Abu Ammar. And the PLO back then and Fatah, they were the names that were recognized. And I was listening to Ramzy before coming on. Back then, as he was basically pointing out, there was no Hamas. And just like when the Israeli regime invaded Lebanon in 1982 and took the capital Beirut and carried out huge massacres. In fact, Ronald Reagan, at that time, he was the president, and he called this a Holocaust, what the Israelis were doing in Lebanon. In just one instance, they slaughtered, by some estimates, 3,500 Palestinians and Lebanese Shias in a refugee camp called the Sabra Shatila refugee camp to the south of Beirut, to the north of what we now know as Dahieh, and to the south of Beirut. And they did that with the support of the Israelis did it by using the Lebanese forces, a fascistic organization which was closely allied to the Israeli regime and continues to be closely allied to the Israeli regime and to Western embassies in Beirut. So back then in 1982, when they took Beirut and were massacring people, there was no such thing as Hezbollah. It did not exist. So Hezbollah was born effectively in 1982, and it began to gradually grow, and it led the resistance until ultimately it expelled the Israeli regime from Lebanon in the year 2000. So back then, when the revolution in Iran happened in 1979, February the 11th, there was no Hamas, there was no Palestinian Islamic Jihad, there was no Hezbollah, but there was a Palestinian people who were being subjugated, who had been expelled from their homes, who were living in a concentration camp called Gaza, and who were, for the most part, living as refugees in the West Bank, among other Palestinians, in Jordan, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt, and again, there was no such thing as Hamas or Islamic Jihad or Hezbollah or anything like that. But the Iranians, the revolutionaries, had a very, very sympathetic view towards the Palestinian people and the people in apartheid South Africa, and that continues until today. And I think that the genocide in Gaza, the ongoing genocide, is not over. Every day they're murdering people and children. That has only intensified Iranian sympathy and support for the Palestinian cause. The war, I think, has had not just regional ramifications, I think has had global ramifications, because the United States lost the war. And no matter how one looks at it, it wasn't just that Iran survived the war. It was that Iran, till the very last moment of fighting, was firing back and striking U.S. bases, striking Israeli bases, Israeli regime assets, and the assets of those countries that were hosting U.S. bases and collaborating with the United States. So much so that even neocons in the United States and major enemies of Iran can call this a defeat for the United States. And the godfather of the neocons said that this was the greatest defeat that the United States had ever experienced militarily. Kagan,
Right.
Robert Kagan.
Right. Yeah. Part husband to Victoria Nuland.
That's right.
Who gave cookies to the people launching the coup, Maidan coup in Ukraine.
That's right.
Thank you for that analysis. Ramzy, what is your response to that, or what would you like to add?
When first of all, such great pleasure to share platform with Professor Marandi. Always, it doesn't just leave you with knowledge and sound analysis, but also hope, lots of it. And I've been listening to him at every opportunity I get. And I'm sorry what has befallen your country, Professor, but also Mabruk for the resilience and the Sumud of the Iranian people in the face of this aggression, completely unjustifiable on any ground. But in a sense, it's almost...
And Mabruk is congratulations, in Arabic, right?
That's right, yeah. But I'm almost... I don't want to use the wrong term and kind of get slaughtered for it, but I'm almost relieved that no one really came out for Iran aside from the various resistance camps in the region, because we've been kind of always kind of hedging our bets on this big country or that country to come to the rescue. And yeah, there was some support here and there, but at the end of the day, this was an Iranian project. And it was an Iranian project that is founded on the power of the people. my real fear wasn't Iran's ability to resist. It was how will the people react. And when I saw millions of people in the streets of all walks of lives and all ideologies and all shapes and colors, all shouting at the Iranians and saying, "This is victory." It was incredible. I knew that this means victory because we've seen it happen a lot before. But also, it's important to denote here that when the genocide started in Gaza, we were desperate for any solidarity to come from anywhere. On a floating boat coming down the Mediterranean, on a country like South Africa filing for genocide claims at the International Court of Justice. But when we actually start seeing solidarity manifest itself in real organic resistance coming from the Middle East, you know that you are at the dawn of a new era. Israel knew that. And I think this is something that future historians will write about. Maybe not today's historian, because everybody is caught in the moment. But we have never experienced that in Gaza, in Palestine. We've experienced failures in the military front. We experienced lack of preparedness. I'm not saying lack of will or lack of good intentions, but always this haphazard approach to war. We are always at the receiving end. We are always the ones who are barely trying to survive and eventually get defeated militarily. But that's not what happened this time around. And I think because these various resistance movements were rooted in popular supports, and that's what made all the difference. There was an interview conducted with Moshe Feiglin, I believe. He tried to run against Netanyahu for the leadership of the Likud party, and he's still an important figure in Israeli politics. And he said something really interesting few days after the genocide. He said, "What worries me about October 7 is that the Muslims are not afraid of us anymore." The Muslims, not the Gazans, not the West Bankers, not the Palestinians even, not the Arabs, the Muslims. There was a psychological element here that has been broken during the genocide. We broke it before. I remember during the first Intifada when we fought back against the Israeli army using, slingshots and rocks. There was a psychological component that broke there. Our fear that this is the mighty Israeli army disappeared. And I was telling you, Katie, about the humor, how we dealt with a lot of this with the humor. Well, you don't make fun at things unless you have a sense of ownership over it. We felt empowered as a people without firing a single shot. And Moshe Feiglin understood that psychology. And I think the genocide was partly because they were trying to break the will and the spirit and the newfound strength of the Palestinians, and by extension, the Lebanese and the Yemenis, and ultimately the Iranians. And every single thing they have done failed. And every time they tried to regain the initiative, the so-called deterrence, they failed. And that failure continues until today. I don't know how will the Israelis deal with this, but I know that something fundamentally has changed in terms of the geopolitics in the Middle East, in terms of the future in the Middle East, and more importantly, in terms of the psychology of the Middle East and its relationship towards the Zionist regime and towards American imperialism.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. And I actually wanted, do you have a response to that, Dr. Marandi? If not, I have another question, but just wanted to know if you wanted to say anything in response to that.
I think, I agree completely, but I also think that it goes beyond the region too. In the West itself, people, even though the censorship and the pressure has been rising throughout this period against dissent and against the Palestinian supporters, in Europe, it's worse than in the United States. But you see people increasingly becoming vocal about their anti-Zionist views. And I'm sure you've discussed this many times, and I'm not an expert on these issues. You have many people who know about these issues much better than I. But the Democratic Party in New York, for example, and the fact that in Jewish neighborhoods or in neighborhoods that have a very high Jewish population, you see candidates who are anti-Zionist, Jewish, non-Jewish, winning the elections, winning the elections within the party, and I think that shows that this sense of the fear has been the cycle of fear has been broken, and the youth, Jews, Christians, Muslims, people from all walks of life, especially in the United States, they've come out and decisively shown the United States and the rest of the world that the mood in the United States is not pro-Israel. It is actually, on the whole, anti-Israel, and is increasingly becoming so. The same is true to a lesser degree in the Republican Party, but the change in the Republican and public Party is just as profound, not as it's coming later than in the Democratic Party, and of course independents. They've all changed and they've evolved, and I think that runs in parallel with what Ramzy has been saying about our region, that people they're no longer intimidated. They no longer live in fear. They know that the empire does not have the power and authority that we were told it had, that it was all-seeing and that it was all-powerful and that there was nothing that we could do about it. That was, I mean, when the war against Iran began, friends of Iran across the world thought the country would collapse in a couple of days. And I'm talking about those powers that Ramzy was alluding to, the powerful countries and also regional countries, and many intellectual friends of the Islamic Republic. They thought that it would collapse. They thought it would collapse last year during the 12-day war, despite the fact that it didn't, and ultimately it won the war, and the Israelis sought a ceasefire. Again, this time around, when the United States brought in all of its capabilities, they were certain that it would fall. And when it didn't, and when it hit back, and then there was this, after a week or so, people were saying, well, if Iran survives this war, it wins. But what happened was that after 39 days, it was clear that Iran was hitting back just as hard as the Americans were firing at the Iranians. And you had not just the United States, it was a coalition of countries, regional countries in the Persian Gulf, Jordan, NATO. The head of NATO has now admitted openly that they were assisting the United States. So you had this huge coalition against what Ramzy rightly points out is Iran and its regional allies. So I think something has broken in the last 3 years, and it's not just in our region. It's not just, I mean, again, look at in Lebanon, after the previous ceasefire between Hezbollah and the Israeli regime, all of the commentary in this region and
oops. Oh no, the Mossad is back at it. Ramzy, are you
in the West okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, you were just frozen for a bit, but we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so what I was saying, that Hezbollah, despite being surrounded, to the east you have a proxy government in Damascus, a U.S. proxy government. Then you have a proxy government in Beirut, and Hezbollah has already been destroyed. But we saw how during the past few months, Hezbollah was battering the Israeli regime, even though Hezbollah was surrounded. And obviously it was it performed extraordinarily well. So you see civil society in Western countries, you see public opinion across the world, you see the public in our part of the world changing and evolving. And I think this is the worst thing possible that that could happen for the Israeli regime. I think that they can gloat about taking 70% of Gaza, but they've antagonized more than 70% of the world, and permanently. And those young people are going to increasingly become powerful, and those older pro-Israeli people are gradually going to be leaving the scene. So I think that the change is profound, even though when we look up, we see clouds, dark clouds, and the world that we live in looks quite dystopian. When you wake up in the morning and see your social media feed and dead babies in Gaza and flattened apartment blocks in Lebanon, it does look. I would agree that it sometimes may seem quite hopeless, but I think that the shift and the changes that are taking place across the world are so extraordinary and so fundamental and so deep, from New York to Tehran. From that, I was just saying that I think that the changes are so fundamental that I think they cannot be ignored.
Right. Ramzy, I've held you past your bedtime, or past how long I was saying. So if you need to leave, of course, please feel free to give any final thoughts that you have, or you're welcome to stay on. But it was longer than we planned. So,
perhaps it's best for me to leave the stage to Professor Marandi to kind of continue with this, and just want to thank you very much, Katie, for the opportunity, and
of course,
would love to connect again in the future, and also looking forward to sharing platform with our dear professor again.
Yes, and look, so someone wrote, we don't see enough of Ramzy, so that we will definitely have you on. In fact, we already said we're going to do another interview about your next book, so we'll have you on, perhaps with some other co-editors, but yes.
That's right, and I have two for the next book, Ilan Pape and Romana Rubio. That's right, yeah.
Exactly, so we can bring all three of you on, hopefully.
Excellent. Looking forward.
Well, it's always a great pleasure being on with Ramzy. His knowledge is extraordinary.
Yes.
Thank you, brother. Means a lot. Take care, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye. Have a great night, Ramzy. Okay. And it's night for where Ramzy is. So, well, okay. So, Dr. Marandi, I have some more questions for you. There is a New York Times article from July 2nd. U.S. officials believed Israel was plotting to kill Iranian negotiators. Any Israeli attempt to kill Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, or Mohammad Ghalibaf, the parliament speaker, would have derailed peace talks, American officials feared. Now, this is, I'm sure, not at all surprising to you. In fact, when you went on accompanied these negotiations in Islamabad, you feared for your life. And Trita Parsi tweets about this story. I'm just going to show what Trita said. Wow, let this sink in. Wow, let this sink in. Let this sink in. After the first round of U.S.-Iran talks in Islamabad, U.S. intelligence picked up that Israel was planning to assassinate the Iranian negotiators as they were returning to Tehran. The U.S. told regional states to alert Iran. Israel's a state that on paper is a U.S. partner, but in reality is so extreme in its obsession to undermine U.S. diplomacy that even it tries to assassinate those the U.S. engages with in crucial negotiations. I can't recall a government as terrified of peace as the one running Israel. So what is your response to this? And also talk about how you anticipated something like this when you were accompanying negotiators.
Well, first of all, the story is not true in one sense, and that is that the Americans did not alert Iran about anything. The Americans, I'm sure that the Israeli regime was contemplating something like this. And I'm sure that the Israeli regime would not carry it out without American consent, or at least without informing the Americans. And Trump himself has repeatedly threatened the negotiators. He has murdered negotiators. He has murdered Iranian leaders. He's murdered kids, little school girls too, but that's a different story. So, I mean, he said that he's going to obliterate Iran. He's going to take Iran back to the Stone Age. He's going to wipe out the civilization. I mean, these are the rantings of a deeply sinister person. And so I don't see any difference between the mentality of the Israeli regime and the mentality of the leaders in Washington. Both slaughter children. The American armed forces slaughtered kids in schools and in gymnasiums and elsewhere. The Israelis did it their own way. But yes, when we went to Islamabad, I was with the delegation on the flight. When we were going there, I don't recall if it was before we flew or when we were in Islamabad, that an opinion piece came out from the Washington Post, which you remember, and it was saying that the negotiators should be killed. At that time, I was telling the negotiators that I think that Dr. Ghalibaf, who is the chief negotiator, should not travel back with us on the plane. I think they should bring him back in some other way. And they too, those who were in charge of security, and they were contemplating what has to be done. And what the Iranians did was that they decided, with the help of, or with the coordination of the Pakistani government, the Iranians changed their planes, and we got on a different plane. And instead of flying back to Tehran, we flew back, and I think I said this on your show before, but we flew back to the city of Mashhad, which is near the Afghan and Turkmenistan border. And then I took a train to Tehran, which was about 1,000 kilometers, I guess. I don't know exactly, but I was on the train for 7-8 hours at least, eight hours probably, till I got to Tehran. So the Iranians were concerned that the United States or the Israelis would carry out an attack, and since they were their partners, that it would have been a joint attack. Just like during the war, the Israelis would bomb one place, the Americans would bomb another place, but they were doing it all in coordination. So yes, and in the recent negotiations, I'm sure you recall, Trump also threatened to murder the Iranian negotiators. So it's not an Israeli regime thing; it's an American thing as well. I mean, American governments, not the American people.
Right, of course, right, yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting. Of course, we should always be skeptical of the New York Times, and who knows who planted that story, right?
That's right.
Perhaps they're trying to appeal to their America First base, maybe by trying to imply that they, although they don't come off that well in this, but I do think it's probably, as you say, there is always both sides, but Netanyahu and Trump both like to pretend that they're fighting with each other more than they really are, to appease their own domestic base. I wanted to ask you about Brad, I'm not sure if Brad is here. He has to help bring in the next guest, so I'm going to screen share. This is a clip of J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, on the Daily Wire's Michael Knowles show Tuesday, commenting on the supposed memorandum of understanding signed between the U.S. and Iran. So let us take a look at this video, and apologies to all that we're unfortunately having to play J.D. Vance, but I do think it's relevant. Okay, 1 second.
So I think what the president has told us to do is use this MOU to sort of refill the world's oil economy, to refill some stocks, and then to see where the hand is. So I think what the president has told us to do is use this MOU to sort of refill the world's oil economy, to refill some stocks, and then to see where the hand is.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on this? And you yourself tweeted in response. I'll reveal one of your responses. Iran has already restocked and is prepared to crush Trump's economy. So what else would you like to say in response to this video?
Yeah, it just shows that how hypocritical and cynical the U.S. government is, and that it is completely dishonest. And it, at least though, the Trump and Vance and this particular team, they're more open about their hypocrisy and their dishonesty. I think it was Pompeo. It was Pompeo who said, "We lie, we cheat, and
Yes.
we steal."
In the CIA, that's what we're taught to do. Yeah,
that's right. So these people are much more open about it than, let's say, the Obamas of the world, the Clintons, who pretended to be something very different, and they weren't. They were the same. But yes, that's something that the Iranians from day one were expecting. And with the signing of the MOU, the Iranians immediately went with the ceasefire, but also then with the signing of the ceasefire, they immediately went to work to prepare themselves for war. So the Iranians they're exporting large quantities of oil. A lot of oil was trapped on tankers in the Persian Gulf during the siege on the ports. That has all been sent to markets in Asia. So they're trying to address economic difficulties, deal with the needs of the population. It's a large country with a large population, and also to rebuild or strengthen or the Iranian military capability. So they're expanding their underground missile bases, underground command and control centers, building new missiles, using new technology. It's not as if it's just Trump and Vance that have that are preparing themselves. The Iranians are preparing themselves too, because they know how dishonest the United States is. But I think the world is in a much more vulnerable situation today than it was 4 months ago. And I don't see the United States being able to defeat Iran. I think it will be a
maybe he got frozen because he said something so heretical.
Okay.
You said you don't think
Yeah.
the United States will be able to defeat Iran?
Yeah, I mean, the United States couldn't defeat Iran during the 39-day war. And now the Iranians, they've learned from their experience in this war. I mean, during the Iranians, after the 12-day war, they had learned a lot from that war, and they prepared themselves for this much bigger war. And they performed better in this war than they even did during the 12-day war, which was the firepower of the Israeli regime is nothing compared to that of the United States. So the Iranians have learned of U.S. capabilities, its strengths, its weaknesses, and it's more confident about its capabilities. It's seen that it can fight and win a war. As I said before, many Iranians didn't think we could win. Many did. I did not believe Iran would be defeated. I did think Iran would win the war. I didn't think it would be so decisive. But in any case, the confidence of people in the country has increased. The economy, of course, is worse off than it was before. There's no doubt about that. But Iran knows that this is a fight for its survival. So, but in any case, what Vance does is that he just discredits the United States, because people across the world see this and say, wow, these people, you can't trust them with anything. And any country that wants to do any deal with Trump or Vance or the Secretary of State or anyone else, they will always keep in mind that these people, they say one thing, but they're in reality, they're planning something else. You cannot trust the regime in Washington for anything. And I just believe that this is another sign of the decline of empire. When the empire was more confident about itself, behave in such a crude.
Sorry, Dr. Marandi, you're frozen again. Once you hear this again, if you could just repeat in full what you just said, you think that this is a sign of decline, of empire in decline or declining empire. And maybe he can refresh.
And it would never use such crude language in such a sinister light. It always, and yeah, I think is it okay
Dr.
now?
Marandi, if you're, maybe, do you mind trying to refresh? Just because what you're saying is always, as always, so interesting. And we missed out a bunch of that. So maybe if you refresh your window. Brad, do you have any other suggestions? Besides, let's Ethernet. We're going to send you an Ethernet cord.
Yeah,
it's probably $1,000 million now.
And our next guest is backstage.
Oh, okay, great, perfect. We'll bring him on.
Everything
shortly.
is working
Great.
on
Thank you.
that end. But yeah, refreshing.
Yeah, and maybe because like that country is being, Okay, let's see. Okay, great. So let me remove that one. Okay. Great. So what were you were saying that this is a sign of the empire in decline?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of a declining empire because a confident empire does not speak in such a way. I mean, they always speak about democracy and freedom and how they're rational and how their victims, whoever they may be, are irrational and they love death or they're unreasonable and so on. And that language has disappeared. And it's not just Trump. If you look at anyone who's been, I mean, if you look at the liberal media, which opposes Trump, but during the war, the language that it was using was more low of the negotiators. That's not something that the United States used to do. I mean, I've been brought up to dislike Kissinger, of course, for very good reason, and I'm sure the same is true with you. But I've never heard Kissinger or anyone like Kissinger say, "Let's murder the negotiators," or "Let's."
Right.
That's so. This sort of the crudeness that we see today, I think, is reflective of a desperation of the empire. Right. And which is, I think, a good thing for the American people. The empire is horrible for the United States. It's horrible for the American people. And when I was young, when I was a child in the United States, I left the United States when I was almost 13. The United States was the country where all the nice bridges were, where all the Lincoln Tunnel. I remember the first time I saw it, I went through it. It was like amazing. This was like amazing technology back then. The best airlines, the best of everything. Right. And then ever since then, it's been all downhill. And it's largely because of late stage capitalism, but more than anything else, neoliberalism has been accompanied by endless wars. And the empire has overextended itself, and now it's collapsing. And hopefully when it collapses, the American people will be freed from this class of, the Epstein class, and they can go back to rebuilding their lives and hopefully live a better future.
Right. Dr. Marandi, do you have like 5 more minutes? Because I would love to, but I know you're so booked, so you may have another appearance. And you also may just need to go to sleep. I would love to have you on with our next guest for like 5 minutes, but is that possible? Or
Sure.
Great.
Sure. Just one thing. I'll definitely stay online.
Perfect. Yeah.
Just one thing is that I think whenever there are 3 of us,
it makes it worse.
my connection becomes less stable. But
Okay.
yes, I'm fine.
Okay. Well, maybe what I can do is I can have you on. I'll push you backstage and bring you back on. Like when it's your turn to talk. We'll try that. Okay. So excited to bring on to this conversation. We have not had him on in a while. It's long overdue. And I am talking about Dennis Kucinich, who served as mayor of Cleveland from 1977 to 1979, U.S. representative in Ohio from 1997 to 2013, during which time he introduced articles of impeachment against both President George W. Bush and Vice President Richard Cheney for lying to take the U.S. into war against Iraq. He ran for president in 2004 and 2008. Welcome back to the show, Dennis Kucinich. Hi, Dennis. How are you?
Katie, good to join you from Cleveland, Ohio, where it's over 90 degrees. The power is out, but I'm empowered to be with you and the good doctor on this call. So
thank you so much. Yes, thank you for joining. I wanted to actually show this. So a couple minutes ago, Dennis, Dr. Marandi mentioned in a Washington Post opinion piece by Mark Thiessen calling for the execution of Iran's negotiators. So I'm just going to show this because he mentioned it, and I would like to show this right now. Okay, is this the right thing? Yes, right. Okay. Mark Thiessen, who worked for actually, he's a columnist, but he also is a former White House director of speechwriting for George Bush, baby, the son. Iran thinks it has leverage, and this is from April. Iran thinks it has leverage. Here's how Trump can prove it wrong. If Iran won't accept the president's terms in 2 weeks, he should impose them. Donald Trump has given the Iranian regime a 2-week deadline to give up its nuclear ambitions, enriched uranium, and support for terror. Now the president needs to make sure Iran's leaders understand that deadline is firm, and he isn't going to accept a bad deal. If they don't agree, military action will commence. And I'm looking for the exact line where he more explicitly calls for the for his execution, but maybe not. But either way, oh, here it is. Okay. Here it is. Okay. He actually does, of course. Okay. So, let's see. Final barrage. 1 second. Okay. So here's what he says. Ready? Carry out a final barrage of leadership strikes, eliminating the Iranian officials who had been spared for the purpose of negotiations. Iran's leaders must be made to understand that their lives literally depend on reaching a negotiated settlement to Trump's liking. If they refuse to do so, they will be killed. Okay, so I wanted to ask each of you, also in light of the fact that right now there are funeral processions being held for the former Supreme Leader, Khamenei. And he, of course, was assassinated at the onset of this war against Iran, along with multiple members of his family, including his 14-month-old granddaughter. So I wanted to ask both of you what your response is to things like these assassinations, and also, the fact that someone can openly call for the assassination of negotiators in a place like the Washington Post. From your perspective, Dr. Marandi, and then, of course, your perspective, Dennis, as someone who served in government, whether this is surprising to you.
Well, as a fan of Dennis, I would have liked him to respond, but I think it's just reflective of the collapsing empire and how crude it has become in confronting its adversaries. I mean, the Iraq War, which Dennis is known for his opposition to that war, we thought nothing back then. We thought, I was a part of the anti-war coalition in the UK. At that time, I was doing my PhD there. And at that time, I thought nothing could be worse than this, a war based on lies and then the occupation of Iraq, even though we hated Saddam Hussein in Iran, but we didn't see the US invasion as legitimate because they're the ones who created Saddam Hussein in the first place. The West gave him the chemical weapons. The Soviets, of course, they also armed him. But in any case, this was an illegal war. And yet, when I look at back then, at least the United States tried to deceive its own people. At least they tried to make the case to the public, no matter how dishonest they were. At least they tried to convince people. But now it doesn't even matter what society thinks. It doesn't matter what the public thinks. From the very start of the war, people were opposed to it. In the case of Iraq, people supported it. And of course, it came after 9/11 and all the propaganda, the anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, and the sentiments that existed back then, which were, I think, not right, but you can understand how these things happen. But now the public opposes it, and it doesn't matter. The media hates Trump almost collectively, except for Fox News and a couple of other outlets maybe, but they won't condemn the attacks. They won't condemn the killing of kids. They won't. So I think we live in a very, things are much worse at one level, but at another level, I see a lot of hope because people across the world, and especially in the United States, see right through the propaganda.
Right. Dennis, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, it's good to see the good doctor there. I follow your commentary very closely, and I often feel that there's somebody who is speaking my own thoughts, maybe with an alienated majesty. But I do want to say thank you, and I also want to say that at this moment, on behalf of myself, and I know many Americans, we extend our condolences to the Iranian people as they once again mourn the passing of the former Ayatollah. And also, furthermore, I want to say how absolutely heartbroken I am over the missile strike that took place in Manab on February 28th that killed those 168 persons, most of them children. Every decent American, every person who loves their own children, who loves their own family, has to look at that as something that we need to find a way to make up for, because it is so tragic and so horrible. Now, with respect to what Glenn Deason wrote, predatory Zionism has become a virus, and it runs through Congress, the administration, the media, the institutional media of the West. It is immoral. It cares not about human life. It to even hint that one would license assassination of negotiators shows you the depths of depravity that the thinking that guides our foreign policy have descended into. And America absolutely needs to take a new direction. And the only way we can do that is to break the ties that we have with Israel, because Israel is not our friend. Israel will undermine the United States at every turn. We need to understand that, and as I've mentioned to you before, Katie, Israel at this very moment is trying to accomplish the merger of their military with the U.S. military. And this integration would enable forever wars. We would see not only a continuation of an accelerated war against Iran and more concentration camps in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, but we'd also see we would be in the foothills of a war against Egypt and against Turkey, because this is all part of the Zionist plan. And one must not conflate Zionism with Judaism ever, because this is a totally different effort to try to hijack a religion which has deeply spiritual principles. One that I subscribe to, which is called Tikkun Olam, heal the world, not destroy the world, heal it. But they hijack that religion and then to accuse people of being against a religion. No, myself, I'm against murder. I'm against genocide. I'm against ethno-nationalism and ethnic cleansing. And we right now are in a situation where Israel's about territorial expansion. Territorial expansion inevitably means more war. It means degradation of human rights. It means international law is being broken. And the arc is a destruction of the moral law and the moral order itself. So we're at an inflection point here in human history. And we either realign with those sentiments that were expressed in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution in a fundamental way for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all people, or we embrace a pathologically murderous ethic which will consume our own nation.
Wow. Yes, that's a great way of putting it.
And I'm sorry to interject, but I just wanted to show everyone this to bolster.
Your mic is pretty low, Brad. I don't know if you can raise it at all.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Is this any better?
Yes, much better.
Okay, sorry about that. Just to bolster what Dennis was saying about the provision in the NDAA, the National Defense, what was it? The
Authorization Act.
Authorization Act, right. That Congress about a week ago or less blocked the Thomas Massie Ro Khanna effort to even have a vote on this provision that would integrate the U.S. and Israeli military, and wanting to put it in the NDAA, but just to what Dennis was saying, this reporting was even saying that even former intelligence members were saying that they have serious concerns, saying in intelligence, Israel is more of an adversary than an ally.
Brad, this is in the NDAA right now. It is in the bill, and it needs to be stripped out because it forfeits American sovereignty. It aligns us. It aligns our policies with Israel's policies and makes our country more vulnerable. It adversely affects our national security. Everything about it is wrong.
Yeah, if they're saying that in terms of intelligence, particularly Israel is more of an adversary than an ally, then combining our intelligence programs between the two is going to make espionage and things like that all the more easy for them. So,
well, again, just to be very clear, people want to massage this this combination, but it is a merger. In a merger, you have integration and you eliminate duplication. These are exact words from the section that's in this bill. And
we're actually going to, I'm sorry to interject. While Dr. Marandi is here, we are actually going to, this is going to be a major part of our discussion with Dennis. But I did want to, before we get into this, because Dr. Marandi is here, unless you'd like to talk about this merger, Dr. Marandi, I had another question for you, for both of you, but do you have something you want to say about this merger?
No, I agree with everything that Dennis has said about both Zionism and Judaism, about the merger. I mean, Zionism, I think the link between Zionism and Judaism, or Zionism and Christianity, is like the relationship between ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Islam. There's just there's no relationship. It's a caricature of Islam, and Zionism, Christian or Jewish, is a caricature of Christianity and Judaism.
Right. And of course, there's more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists. So
of course,
yes. As both of you well know. I do want to show, given that you were talking about the difference between Republicans and Democrats, and there is but not just Republicans and Democrats, Dr. Marandi, you talked about Kissinger, who's of course a Republican, and this crudeness that kind of covers up a profound similarity in some ways. And I want to show an op-ed that Hillary Clinton, none other than Hillary Clinton, wrote at the Financial Times. The world may not like Trump's Gaza plan, but there is no alternative. If even I, an implacable opponent of the president, can accept this as the best option, then surely others can too. And then she goes through, you know, that there's no alternative framework waiting in the wings. No rival coalition is quietly preparing a more viable proposal. The 20-point plan is not the one many of us would have drafted, but it remains the only framework backed by sufficient leverage, political engagement, and potential resources to move the parties towards implementation. And without such a plan, the crisis in Gaza will only deteriorate, with Hamas retaining both political and practical influence over a devastated population through armed actors, local administrative structures, aid distribution networks, and access to basic goods and services. So what is your response to this endorsement of this peace plan, so-called peace plan, that is the creation of Trump, his Gaza plan?
Is that directed to me?
Sure, either one of you, yeah. But yeah, you can.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll be brief because unfortunately I have to leave.
Yes.
Otherwise, I'd love to listen to what Dennis has to say and to what you and Brad have to say. You know, in a way, it reminds me of something that you know about quite well, and that is Syria. And when Trump came to power the first time, the Democrats were, you know, vehemently opposed to him, very hostile towards him. Then you had Russiagate, and then you had those fake, the false flag operations in Syria, the chemical attacks, which I know you've had very good guests on your show to explain how they were, you know, it was these proxies that were supported by foreign intelligence agencies that were behind those false flag operations, and then the OPCW experts who went there and who said that these were not legitimate, they were sidelined and silenced. But the point is that when Trump began firing missiles at Syria, his opponents suddenly supported him.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
His opponents in the Democratic Party. And I recall many of them were saying that Trump has finally become the U.S. president. So by firing missiles into Syria, you become a legitimate president of the United States.
Exactly, yeah. They were all, yeah, exactly. Well, Dr. Marandi, thank you so much for your time, especially given how you are so busy. We always love talking to you. And come back soon, and we're going to get you an Ethernet cord so your connection can be as good as possible.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I hope to see you soon.
Great. Yes, we will.
Bye for now.
Bye. Okay, Dennis, back to, just wanted to, for the sake of his connection, wanted to kick you out, but welcome back. What is your response? I mean, you were someone who actually ran against Hillary Clinton.
Well, you know, I've known Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton for a long, long time. And, you know, on a personal level, I just have to say that her approach to the Middle East has been counterproductive. I think that Barack Obama has already admitted that the attack on Libya was the worst mistake of his presidency. I know about that because I had the privilege of leading the effort to try to stop the United States from going to war against Libya. I had a call from Saif Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi's son, who basically said to me as this was roiling, he said, "What are you doing? We've done everything you've asked us to do. We don't do this to us. Don't bomb us." And of course, a couple of days later, they bombed the palace and killed Gaddafi's grandchild. Gaddafi, of course, was killed, and Hillary made that very well-known statement. We came, we saw, he died.
And then laughed, exactly. Yeah.
And then laughed. And I, you know, I I've always been looking for the Hillary Clinton from the early 1990s, but I think for whatever reason she began to take a very hard line, and it hasn't worked out in terms of U.S. policy. And Donald Trump's essentially has given Israel the opportunity to ethnically cleanse Gaza, the West Bank, to kill tens of thousands of Palestinians, to and has not intervened to stop the bombing in Lebanon, South Lebanon. Now, I have been to the West Bank. I've been to Lebanon and to Syria about a dozen times. My wife was on the U.S. board of UNRWA into Gaza, and together we have really had a commitment to peace in the region. I knew the players there in various ways, and I also knew the dirty game that the U.S. was playing, how we were backing ISIS, how we toppled Assad and ended up affecting a bloody purge that is still ongoing. And yet it's Israel in the background claiming land in Quneitra, attempting to use the toppling of the Assad government as a way to grab more land, which they certainly have every intention of doing. It's when you're in the region and you see how beautiful it is, and you see how lovely the people are, and you see how they just want peace. They're not, I did not hear in casual talk on the street talking to people, any desire to wipe out Israel at all. People just didn't like getting killed. They didn't like having their family members killed. They would grieve the conditions, but there wasn't this rabid anti-Israel feeling out there. People just want to live their lives. And yet the United States, with policies like Trump is still permitting to happen, is instrumental in death and in destruction of the social fabric of the people. Katie, I'll tell you, I think you really, as you have, you really have to go back to World War II to look at the way the Nazis treated the Jews, to understand the deep level of suffering that the Palestinians and now the people in South Lebanon are experiencing at the hands of the IDF, which is in and of itself a criminal organization. Mm-hmm. There's no other way about it. Led by individuals who are themselves criminals, some officially arrest warrants by the International Criminal Court. So this is a significant human tragedy. But what's the greater tragedy, though, is failing to recognize what's going on and failing to call it for what it is. Because from our comfort here in the United States, it's so easy to just, pass the biscuits, please. There are people, their children getting shot in the head and the chest as a matter of policy in Gaza. What are we about if we just permit this kind of moral collapse to occur right in front of our eyes, and yet we say nothing about it? So, we're in a time where the obligation to speak out, with the insistence on not just on our own humanity, but on the humanity of the globe. This is not just about us anymore. This is about the world. And we cannot expect to permit this kind of conduct, which Israel is visiting upon the Palestinians and the people of South Lebanon. We cannot expect this to happen and think that it will never come back to us. Oh, yes, it will. We must not pretend that these kind of things are just over there. No, if it's happening right in front of our eyes, it's happening to us as well.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, look, you can look at physics. You can look at the Heisenberg theory that if you view something, you change it. You become part of what you observe. You can look at quantum physics and you can look at the human genome theory, that we're all made of the same stuff. We're all made of the same stuff, 99.9%. And we act as though this evocation of an outgroup to say, well, not them. No, they're animals. Oh, really? Why would we even treat animals in such a brutal way? What happens is politics affects culture, culture affects policy, policy can kill people. And that's the cycle that Israel's in right now. And frankly, the U.S. has been holding hands on this, and the merger that I've been speaking about, Katie, draws the U.S. in ever deeper into complicity with Israel's misdeeds.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that merger in 1 second. But before that, okay, I want to just show that you've been someone who's been critical of Netanyahu for a while, and you actually tried to kind of rein him in. This is a video of you. When is this video from? This famous video of you?
September of 2002.
Okay. So, and I promise, then we're going to get to the merger, but I think this is important context. So let's take a look at this exchange.
There is a need to know if the United States is being called upon to launch preemptive action against Iraq. There is a need to know the evidence, and because I share the concern that other members have articulated here about the effect that a preemptive attack on Iraq by the United States would have not only on the people of our country who would be called upon to wage that and innocent civilians, but also the effect that it would have on Israel. Now, you stated in your remarks that if the United States launched a preemptive attack on Iraq, that Iraq in Saddam Hussein, as you described it, dying gasp, would be expected to launch a counterattack on Israel. If the United States does not launch a preemptive attack on the state of Iraq, do you see any indication that Iraq is prepared to launch an attack on Israel?
First of all, let me comment on when I said I don't need to know. I meant I don't need the detailed kind of detailed information that always involves, just by the nature of the information, some indication of sources. And I, for one, try to avoid that when I'm not in office. But I also say that if you connect the dots, here's a man who, from the minute he achieved powers, is trying to create a nuclear weapon. 20 years ago, he's very close to producing it. He's foiled. He changes the technology to centrifuges that will prevent him being foiled again.
The question I had, though, do you have any indication that Saddam Hussein is going to attack Israel?
Oh, if he will attack Israel.
Absent a preemptive launch by the United States.
I think it's, I cannot tell you that he will attack Israel at a particular time. I think what you have to assume, and this is a fair assumption, that he doesn't have to necessarily directly attack Israel. What you can do, what these people do, for example, the Taliban regime didn't directly attack the United States. It harbored a terrorist group that did the job for them. And this is precisely the problem. The problem is you're not dealing with Iraq alone. You're dealing with a terror network. You're dealing with a system where you have proxies. We now live in a world where these regimes have proxies.
You talk about a network of terror. Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon at this point?
First of all, are there other nations that are developing nuclear weapons? Yes.
Should we launch any other preemptive attacks?
First, let me say what they are, and then let me make a suggestion how to proceed.
Thank you.
The answer is categorically yes. The two nations that are vying, competing with each other, who will be the first to achieve nuclear weapons, is Iraq and Iran.
Okay, so there you have it. It's unfortunate that your warnings weren't heeded, but what is your response to this decades later? If you saw that entire stream live, you were so in luck because you get this whole thing. If you're watching this later and you want to see the full interview with Dennis Kucinich, where we talk about interesting things like his interaction with Netanyahu, what happened in Libya, you can do that either by becoming YouTube members or by becoming Patreon members. And to become YouTube members, you press subscribe and then you can press join. To become Patreon members, you just go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. I'm going to read some super chats, but actually before that, I want to tease a really good Patreon only full interview that we did with John Mearsheimer and Yanis Varoufakis. Let's play two very short clips from that interview. And if you haven't already become members, then make sure you do, because you're going to want to see this full interview.
One other dimension to this, what's very interesting is that David Barnea, who was the head of Mossad, played a key role along with Prime Minister Netanyahu in convincing Trump that this cockamamie scheme would work. But what's interesting is that Barnea's predecessor, who was the head of Mossad, a man named Cohen, thought this was a crazy idea. He knew it wouldn't work. And it was Barnea who flipped the script. And I think that Barnea and Netanyahu might have understood, like Barnea's predecessor did, that this was just not going to work. It was not going to work in the sense that a shock and awe campaign was going to overthrow the regime, but it was going to work in a sense that you would entrap the United States into this war, and we would ultimately have no choice but to topple the regime. But in the end, what's happened here is that President Trump has acted the way President Kennedy acted. Kennedy bailed out. He did not fall into the trap. Trump definitely initially fell into the trap, but now he's trying to get out of the trap.
Okay.
Barnea, who's the head of Mossad, and they convince him that we have the magic formula, that if we launch a shock and awe campaign and we decapitate.
Let's not show this. Actually, it's my fault because it just shows the bottom of his face. But lots of great material, and it's not cut that way. That was just an automatic short tool that we used. Let me just read the super chats. Let's see. We don't see enough Ramzy. I read that. Thank you so much. Happy 4th, Katie and friends. Thank you so much. Thank you, Katie. Great panel. Ramzy, Professor Marandi, Dennis. Thank you. Love this Friday show. Thank you, Ryan. We added the Katie Halper Show to the Orwell Times app on Google Play and Apple App Store as a news source with other indie creators. Cool. Awesome. Let's see. We didn't get any members, YouTube members, but that's okay. We did get some Patreon members. Let me thank them. You see, this is what's so cool about becoming Patreon supporters. You get to be famous and read on the show. Okay, 1 second. Let's see who we got. We got, when was our last stream? What date was it? July 2nd?
That would have been Tuesday.
Which it was?
That would have been the 30th, I believe.
Oh, okay. So we got a lot since then. Great. Probably because of this Mearsheimer Yanis thing, the 30th. So here we go. Ready? Thank you so much, Ernesto. Thank you so much, Donald. Thank you so much, Potshot. Thank you so much, Wings. Thank you so much, Junabai. Thank you so much, Gray Wolf. Thank you so much, Fran. Thank you so much, Al S or AIS. I think Al S. Thank you so much, Pablo. Thank you so much, Flying Guy. Thank you so much, Hoke. Thank you so much, Blas. Thank you so much, Donald. Thank you so much, Andre. Thank you so much, Christopher O. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Thank you so much, Benjamin. Thank you so much, Johanna. And thank you so much, Sinal Kid. We really could not do this show without you. No joke. We couldn't do the show without you. So if you haven't already, please like, please subscribe, please become Patreon members or become YouTube members. And we will see you Tuesday. And thank you so much, Brad and Nate, and to our guests. And I think that's all we have to say, right, Brad?
Yep, you
Great.
covered it.
And again, this full, if you want to see the full chat with Dennis Kucinich, you can find that by becoming YouTube members or by becoming Patreon members, as well as the full Giannis John Mearsheimer clip. So 2 amazing reasons to become members. Bye.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!